So Iran trade and Taiwan issues are expected to top the agenda as U.S. President Donald Trump meets Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing for high-stakes talks today. For more, we're joined today by Dr. Andrew Millard, head of the Department of International Relations at Changwon National University. Professor Millard, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
So a lot of attention is focused on what Trump and Xi will discuss regarding the Iran war. So just before leaving Washington, Trump said he does not need China's help. What appears to be the U.S. strategy here, and what role could China's Xi Jinping play in the conflict?
So this is not surprising that Donald Trump made this statement that the U.S. Doesn't need China's help. This is really Donald Trump projecting this show of strength of the U.S., trying to avoid any sign of weakness, because and this is very important, what we see right now in this summit is kind of the positions have changed a little bit. China is now in an incredibly strong position, arguably one of the strongest positions it's ever been in terms of its rivalry with the United States. So Donald Trump, he's going into this showing every sign of strength that he can, not wanting to show weakness to China's administration. Now, when it comes to Iran, was he true? Was it right? Arguably, you could say yes. I mean, the Americans, they have a couple of options. They could either back down, they could just go back to the negotiations and come up with some deal, but maybe that would leave them looking a little bit weak. Or another option is the US has not used its full military capabilities against Iran. That's one option they do have. So, I mean, technically he's right. They could do it without China, but I think China also could play a very big role. We know that Araki, the Iranian foreign minister, was in Beijing last week. So China will be supporting Iran. It will be slightly more covertly, sort of behind the scenes, but they are playing a role. And we know that China is a very big importer of Iranian oil. So even though China has been very quiet on the Iran war so far, it will be feeling the effects, especially as its economy is an export-driven economy. So maybe the strategy from China is maybe they want to use this as a little bit of leverage, potentially in other areas, for example, maybe Taiwan, where they could see this playing a little bit of a role.
Right. I'm glad you just mentioned Taiwan, because there's also speculation that Beijing is expected to press Trump on this issue of Taiwan. And under pressure from Beijing, Trump actually earlier indicated an openness to rethinking U.S. support for Taiwan, which alarmed its backers. So how do you think the talks could unfold on this matter and other geopolitical issues?
I mean, for me, this is the million-dollar question. So I think of all of the various issues that they will be discussing in this summit, in this visit, I think Taiwan is going to be probably the most complicated issue. And so what we see from China is maybe China is trying to push and pressure the United States to change its position towards Taiwan. Now, this is very important because for the past 40, 50 years, the US, even though they followed the one China policy, they have been still militarily supplying Taiwan, providing them with support, saying they would defend Taiwan. But they've also said that officially they do not support Taiwanese independence. This is the wording. What China may push for is that they may push the US to change this wording to that they officially oppose Taiwanese independence. So this would be quite a big shift, a big change in the US policy towards Taiwan. And we know over the past year, Donald Trump, he has been much more critical against Taiwan. He put 15% tariffs on them. He's accused them of stealing semiconductor manufacturing from the US. So maybe China does see this as an opportunity where it can force a little bit of change in the US position.
I see. And a range of economic issues is also expected to dominate the talks, including trade, tariffs, and rare earths. How do you see the meeting playing out on the economic front?
So again, so you just mentioned this in the short video clip before our interview. Donald Trump, he said before leaving for Beijing that the economy, that the opening up of the Chinese economy, this was his #1 priority. When he gets to Beijing, the first thing he said he's going to talk about with Xi is this issue of the economy, trade, and getting China to open up, change some of its regulations to allow basically a more level playing field for US companies in China. So I think this is going to be a very big part of this summit for sure. When it comes to specifics, I think as we've seen, agriculture, that's been a very big topic over the past few months, really because of the tariffs that Donald Trump put on China, and then China's response by saying, look, we're not going to buy agricultural products, in particular soybeans from the US. This has had a huge impact domestically for Donald Trump. So that'll be a major issue. Tariffs, I think, will be less of an issue this time, just because the Supreme Court decision and various decisions in the US mean that this is a less viable option now for Donald Trump. But when it comes to rare earths, we also know that for the past year, Donald Trump, he's been very focused on maintaining and guaranteeing access to rare earths, not just from China, but globally, various different sources. So I think when it comes to that, Donald Trump would be very happy if he could guarantee or secure some sort of negotiation, some sort of deal when it comes to rare earths. But of course, to support all of this, he's taking with him this big delegation of, I think, 17 CEOs of very powerful US conglomerates. So this will provide a lot of support for this argument too.
I see. And joining Trump in China this week are more than a dozen U.S. executives, including CEOs of Tesla, Elon Musk, and Apple's Tim Cook. And NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang also got on Air Force One at the last minute after a last-minute invite. What message does this send, and what are these U.S. tech companies hoping to achieve from this trip?
Right. So, I mean, this is very important. So what we can see with this list of CEOs, these aren't just random CEOs from some small or medium-sized companies. These are big powerhouses. These are the influential CEOs of major companies in the US, major global companies. So this is a very positive sign that Donald Trump is taking this. This is not just rhetorical. This is not just Donald Trump saying, oh, hey, Mr. Xi, we want to have more trade. Let's start changing some regulations. He's taking this big group of powerful CEOs so that this is a clear indication. We are here. We are ready. We want to be investing more. We want to do more trade with China. But right now, it's the Chinese regulations, various obstacles, various challenges that are hindering this. So from that side, it's very, very positive. And this is, to be honest, this is quite common. So if you go back to 2018, for example, in Korea, we saw when President Moon visited Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, he also took with him quite a large delegation of South Korean CEOs for the exact same reason, to show the intent that we are here ready to invest. Now, the situation is a little bit different. Here, maybe you could also argue it shows a little bit of a change in this relationship, and maybe we could also say it's a little bit of a sign of weakness, that maybe the US look like they're going to China. Maybe they're starting to beg a little bit for the Chinese to change, to open up, because it's needed for them. So there's a couple of ways we can look at this, but really this summit, lots of issues, going to be very, very interesting to see how it all turns out.
Right. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Millard, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.